When you buy your first home, part of it is definitely an investment decision. I mean, it's the biggest purchase that most people are ever going to make in their life. But it's also a very emotional decision as well.
Huge.
So yeah, you're going to have your kids in here. Like it's probably not going to be your forever home, your first home, but it's going to be your home for long enough.
And you want to buy one that has capital growth, that when you do buy your next home, you bought the right one, so that you're going to get some value when you sell it, because you're not paying capital gains on it, right?
So my guest today is supporting a very thick head of hair, which he never used to have, is married with 2 kids, business owner, homeowner, avid CrossFitter, still a CrossFitter?
Yeah, CrossFitter, strength trainer, all that.
Oh yeah, all that sort of stuff. And my very good friend, Dominic McKenna, welcome to the potty.
Great to be here, Leigh. You had to start with the hair, didn't you?
Mate, I did. Like, this thing is thick. This is like. So there's going to be plenty of people who are just listening to this, and even the people who are watching won't have seen you before. But it's fair to say that there wasn't a whole heap going on top of couple.
There was at the back. So what Leigh is alluding to, for those of you watching on camera, I will look up there, is I have a whole lot of hair that I didn't used to have. I had a hair transplant back in March, and for years I'd thought about doing it. It was actually on my 100 Dreams list, by the way. We can talk about that later.
Your 100 Dreams list.
It's now 168. And anyway, I was like, I want to get a hair transplant at one day, and then and I did, and I put 20 grand aside, and we decided to put this whip back on in March. And I tell you what, I looked awful for about 4 months. I looked like an absolute tennis ball, and now it's come together, and it looks great. But you know what's crazy? It's only 40% of the way there.
Mate, how can it get any thicker than that?
Yeah, well, it's going to look like the back.
Give me a look at the back.
The back. Look.
Give me a look at the back. No, here, your hand's in the way. The top. All right, very good.
Anyway, it's the density. The density.
the follicles per square centimetre.
That's right.
Anyway, mate, it's actually quite amazing, because I saw you shortly after it had been done, and I'm not going to lie, I had some question marks about what was going on.
Everyone did. My wife was concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, I would have been concerned.
But hey, isn't that interesting how that ties into when you make a big decision to do something, i.e. buying a first property, starting a business, you go through this lonely chapter where you've made a decision, but you don't know whether the decision you made was right, even though the commitment's there, and then you start to doubt it, and then you have that window of what they call buyer's remorse. Think, was it a good decision? Now the market's changed. I was a few months in, read, and it was like hair was trying to push through, but nothing was happening. It said, no, there's this period of time where nothing's going to happen, and then it's going to take off. And that took off for me in late June. Like, there was sprinklings, and then bang. But I went to Europe in April, and I had people looking at me weird, because I literally looked like a red tennis ball. Yeah,
I mean, your kids would have been looking at you weird, mate, let alone strangers.
That's it.
Yeah, it's funny you say about that. I did a guest spot on a podcast, whatever it was. It was something online. And I was speaking on that, and we were talking exactly about that, the wilderness. So I know when I started this business, there was like a full 9 months where nothing was happening, where I was working my backside off. People were laughing at a lot of the things that I was doing, and I just had a vision and stayed true to it, and eventually it came so.
Yep.
But
that's everyone goes through that journey.
Yeah,
everybody goes through it, right? But also everybody tries to not go through that journey, versus just embracing it and leaning into it. And that's where podcasts and listening to people's experience, reading books, in being around the right environment, and people will push and encourage you through that. Because if you don't, people can sabotage themselves.
100%. And our clients, we see that all the time. You know what we see with our clients, which it's like a really interesting education in the psychology of people. It's quite often our clients, it's the people closest to them that are unknowingly undermining them the most.
Yep.
It's like the people who are trying to protect you in a lot of ways are also just trying to keep you exactly where you are.
Of course,
and I don't believe there's any malice to it. I mean, I'm sure there's dickheads everywhere, but I think in most cases there's no malice to it. But Yeah, it's bananas. Like we have people who have parents who full talk people out of it. Have one guy who I actually ended up talking to his brother, and he gave me this lecture on how, the property market's all going to go down. It's a Ponzi scheme, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that client went ahead and that property would be worth nearly double now. Should bring him. Maybe not.
Yeah, yeah. But isn't that interesting? Hey, in the industry I'm in, it's the same thing. Mentorship, coaching, business, whatever we do, and you see people starting up businesses with us, it's the exact same thing that we see in our industry. It's in building businesses, in the mentoring side that I do, it's always the people closest to them that will be the hardest to overcome. And it all comes from a place of a good place of intention, people meaning to help, and I think their heart's in the right place, most of them. Some of them are just painful. I think it also comes down to when people have growth and fixed mindset. You have people with a growth mindset and they want to grow and they want to take new risks, and then you get somebody else who's very fixed and is risk averse, and that is a real struggle in people's relationships. We call them the dream stealers though. They just are. People will talk you out of stuff, the well-meaning brother-in-law, the sister. I see that weekly in what I do, weekly. So isn't it fascinating across two totally different industries, the psychology of people is exactly the same. Yeah,
well, people are people, right? It doesn't matter where you go. What do you mean by growth and fixed mindset?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Carol Dweck, who's a psychologist, wrote a book probably 13 years ago called Mindset, and she talks about the concept of someone who has a growth mindset, someone who's wanting to, think about, like, you have a growth mindset. You're training, you're doing sports, you're in different ways, you're trying to grow yourself, learn new things. Podcasts, like I've sent you podcasts, you've sent me ones. That's a growth mindset. In the way that people learn is a massive one. Whereas you get people that are fixed, they think that learning is static. You can only learn so much. You get to some people who get to a certain age and they're very much on the wavelength of, when I'm younger, I'm willing to learn new things, but then when you get to your late 20s or 30s, you start to get a bit more set in your ways. That's a classic fixed mindset. But then you get people who are more growth-minded, which I very much am. I'll learn new things. I'll try new things. 5 years ago, I started doing cold showers in the morning. I've done them pretty much every morning for 5 years because I wanted to try new ways to biohack and grow and get into that whole space. It's why I'm willing to look at new investments. It's why I'm willing to try new innovative strategies within my business because it's all growth orientated. Whereas fixed, and you see people who get into business and are fixed, they go out of business. They do. They literally get flushed out by someone who's more innovative that comes up behind them. So you see this a lot in couples. If you find someone, like, I'll give you an example. You're a bachelor, you're on the market?
I am indeed.
Yes.
I am indeed. Lock up your daughters, ladies.
So if you think about it, you're someone who's growth minded. So if you're out there and you're dating, the biggest thing that I would look for if I was to, I'm 14 years married, 12 years married, 14 years together. If I was to go back and start all over again and I didn't have the amazing wife I do, the one thing I would look for most is that their growth mindset.
Interesting.
Because if they're not down the track, the data shows that I've seen and the data that I've collected and seen within relationships that if you have someone who's fixed and someone who's growth, they are going to have challenges. Someone wants to grow, someone wants to build themselves, someone wants to get ahead, and the other person wants to hold someone there. Oh, man, difficult. And it's even more difficult when that person outgrows them further.
Yeah. I've often thought this about relationships where, it's not, I'm clearly no expert, 42 and single. Something's going wrong.
Happily single though, right?
Yeah, maybe don't do what I'm doing. But I've often thought with relationships that it's what makes it so hard. It's not just a matter of finding all the right things now. So someone you're attracted to, someone you get along with, all of that stuff. But then we all grow and change. And we grow and change a lot more when we're younger. And to find someone who will grow and change with you in the same ways, I don't know, just like it seems a tall order. Seems a really tall order. Particularly, like if I had got married to some of the girls I was dating when I was 20, there is no way that could have lasted.
And it is not easy. It isn't, because you see so many people out there who don't necessarily want to grow, and not necessarily grow in all the same ways, but be on a growth plan, a growth path with you. I think that's key. Like, for example, if you get back into the dating scene and you find someone who's got mutual interest is so important, right? If you have no mutual interest, that's going to be very difficult. So my wife and I, for example, we love movies. We love eating out. We love experiences. We love traveling. Love spending time with each other. Love chatting. All of these things. Now, has everything always been roses for us? Of course not. There's ups and downs. But at the same time, we have enough mutual interest. So recently, my dad actually passed away 3 weeks ago, and me and him were so close, even though he was 40 years older. Man, that is like generation and a bit. But we had so many mutual interests in so many things that our relationship was so tight. So if I was out there dating again, I'd look for growth mindset, mutual interests, and then of course the fact that I can be on some sort of growth path with somebody. You think about this, perfect example, tying into what we're talking about. You're buying a property, you're getting into this space, okay, we're going to buy our first home, cool, and you get somebody who's more of a fixed mindset, and they're like, oh, with money, whoa, man, you see it with money, where someone doesn't want to spend too much, they risk, we've got to have savings in the bank, even though that savings is actually working against them because of inflation. So the money sits in the bank, but they don't want to put it towards a property. And then this person is more growth orientated. They've got a higher tolerance for risk. They're like, no, I want to buy our first property and then get some equity in that, and then hopefully be able to borrow against that for another property, land ideally, of course. I learned that lesson, which we'll talk about later. But now you have this massive mismatch in not only mindset but values, where someone's like, no, I just want to be secure and safe. It's like, yes, but to do this, we're going to get closer to that. But when you're doing that, that person feels farther away from it. So it's a real polarity, isn't it?
Yeah, so we nearly always find that when we have customers come in, so we'll have one of the couple is absolutely the driver. It could be the guy, the girl. It doesn't it knows no gender, but one person is the driver and one person's just the passenger. They're like, okay, we're buying a house. But where I find it doesn't work is where you've got one person who's the driver, where they're like, right, we need a house, we need to set ourselves up for our kids, we need security. But then you've got one person who is still a spender and a partier and hasn't really given up,
There you go.
Yeah, the stuff from the 20s or whatever. And what they get concerned about is that there won't be enough money to party and carry on if they buy a house. And that gets in the way of it. That stops it. I find, but just having one person who's a bit gung-ho and then one person who's scared, I think is the words that I would use. I think that's how we get most of our clients, to be honest. One person's gung-ho, one person's a little bit like, I don't know.
Gun-shy.
Yeah, but I'll trust you.
I see that too. We have people who want to come into business similar to us. We start people in businesses, though, not properties. And so someone starts up, they want to build another income because inflation, they've got all their reasoning, and then their partners may be a little bit more ambivalent, skeptical. There's nothing wrong with skepticism, by the way. Skepticism is very, very healthy. In fact, I wish I had been a little bit more skeptical of some of my investments I did early on because it would have saved me money. Skeptical meaning I'm uninformed, I don't have enough education, whatever it is. So you can be skeptical, but when we are cynical, now we're in a totally different ballgame.
How do you distinguish between the two?
Skepticism. So I'll often talk to people when I do a client meeting, and I'll say, I would be skeptical if you're not skeptical.
Yeah.
Because you don't know me. Trust gets rid of all skepticism. It takes time to get to know people. That's why I think your book's so smart, because people get a window into you guys before they actually meet you, maybe, or they get to meet you and then walk away and delve deeper into your thought process through your book.
Yeah.
So skepticism is lack of being informed, lack of awareness, and lack of education.
So if I was to try and sum up what you mean by skepticism, I think what you're saying is basically wary. If someone wasn't wary to begin with. And then what was the other word you used?
Now, when we get away from skepticism, we now move into cynicism, where I immediately go, oh, he's selling property to you, he wants something from you, he's just trying to make money out of you, he's scamming you. What's the catch? Now we have a cynic versus someone who's like, hey, when you go and do your first meeting with them, ask them, what do they get out of that? What does that look like? What's their piece in it all? Yeah. Much smarter. And a much smarter approach. I mean, trust but verify.
Yeah, sure.
Cynical person doesn't trust and doesn't want to verify. In fact, what they tend to do is they tend to go and just look for validating stuff on the internet to meet their cynicism, and they go, see, there's negativity about anything.
So, yeah, thinking again back to our clients, if we have a skeptical client, so if one of the partners is skeptical, it will just never work because they never trust us. They never listen to us. And yeah, I mean, we can do whatever we want, particularly with the client who is more gung ho, but they just go home and the skeptical one is like, oh fuck those, I got to stop swearing.
Do you know what I do to tackle a lot of that too? Is I try to get ahead of it.
Yeah.
I live by the principle of preparing, so you don't have to repair. And so the idea is, and I'm talking, you're better in sales than I am. You would say to someone, oh, you bring your partner in with you, that'd be great, right? But sometimes people aren't willing to do that. They say, hey, can you bring your wife in with me or your husband? We're happy to have a chat with them, talk them through it all. They can ask us questions. We're a totally open book.
Yeah.
But then sometimes they'll go, oh, they're not really cool. What I want to do is actually send you a message or send you an email and lay some things out. You can show it. You can talk to them about it. I'm actually happy to do a video as well explaining it all. So I just get ahead of it. And I'll try to equip that person because one thing I've learned, and all men listening to this are welcome to get offended, men relaying information to their wife is one of the surefire ways to shoot yourself in the foot, because men struggle to relay information to their wives because, one, they get put under pressure and they don't have great recall.
When we meet up with clients, it would be a rare day that we wouldn't meet up with both the husband and the wife.
Exactly.
Because, and even the kids, because they're like, hey, you're going to live in this home. So
it's a big decision.
You've got to see it. You've got to be able to picture yourself in it. You've got to be comfortable. Like where we have to begin. Getting a first home buyer into a home is so hard. There's so many competing priorities that shouldn't be there, and all of it is hard enough without us then trying to fight a battle with the people that we're trying to help. Yep. So to begin with, there has to be trust. Everyone has to be on the same page. We spend a lot of time on that. We do a lot of things like the podcast, the book, there's articles, there's all sorts of stuff. And all of that is about going, hey, the doors are open, come and check us out. Because, you can't hide in something like this. You can't do 1.5-hour conversations every week and be hiding. Like, you can only be yourself. And the idea of that is so we can get people on board, get them on board with the vision. They can trust us. But then if we're all on the same page, then we can go out and fight the battles. But if someone says, oh, no, I'm just coming on my own, it's like, well, whoever the other person is, except in rare cases, they probably just don't want to do it. So maybe you guys have a discussion first and then come back into us and we can help.
Great.
There was something that you said earlier which reminded me of this story that I heard the other day. I think it was around growth and fixed mindset. So there's this bloke sitting out the front of the pub. So, Cobra hat, Winnie red in hand is how I imagine it. And he's got this dog laying in front of him. So the story goes that this bloke rolls up. He looks at the guy, he looks at the dog, and the dog starts sort of whimpering in pain. Yeah, good dog, right? And the guy says to him, he goes, mate, what's wrong with your dog? And the guy goes, stupid bugger's laying on a nail. The guy goes, well, why doesn't he get up? He goes, I don't know, mate. I guess it just doesn't hurt enough yet. Mm-hmm. And so true of our lives is, sometimes we need to get into enough pain before we're willing to take on different mindsets. It's very easy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to sit in the status quo.
Well, complacency kills, doesn't it? Mm. But people go, oh, well, I'm not going to get killed by it. No, but your dreams will, your ambition, any sort of forward motion. And I love that analogy because I think, well, for myself, how do I get myself uncomfortable? In fact, one of the things I teach in our business to people is you've got to box yourself in for success. Mm. And people go, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, you're going to have to eliminate some of the other options because success, the concept of success, whatever it means to people, it's really only achieved when things are done by necessity, not luxury. And in Australia, fortunately, we live in a phenomenal country where the average wage is, 60-something? You would know better than I do. What's it, 70,000? More. More? So yeah. More, right? The average Australian wage. It's remarkable, man. We live in this incredible country. We were sitting on the Gold Coast, the sun's out, fabulous. Look at the waterways. Only problem is we have such a casual culture now that I think people have become casualties of their casualness. And they become casualties in the way that they spend, how they approach life, how they look at property. One of the great fallacies left on Australians was, she'll be right, mate. They go, she'll be right, mate. Well, she actually won't, because if you look at the data, the amount of people at 65 years old that are on government assistance, they're not right. She's not right. She's broke. And then if you go to New Zealand, which is, man, that's like another level, and I don't mean a higher level in terms of another level of complacency. And I heard a statistic recently that 30% of adults in New Zealand, I'm happy for whoever, or if it were Joe Rogan, I'd say, hey man, can you verify this?
Young Jamie.
Yeah, Jamie, can you verify this? But I heard that, I was told that 30% of adults in New Zealand are on the government benefit.
Yeah, right.
30%. And you can see it because it's over there. It's something that, like, it's a lot more common. You know, it's an option for people. Whereas here, you don't. That's not no way nearly as high.
I'm going to pivot totally off subject here.
Let's go.
Joe Rogan. Speaking of Joe Rogan, yeah. Have you seen on Joe Rogan how they like to get into smelling salts?
Yeah.
Well, I was looking at it and I'm just like, I wonder what those things are. I actually have some smelling salts.
Did you get some? Did you? Man, I tell you one thing about Leigh, you just never know where things are going to go. This guy is going to take you to the deep end. Crikey, you got legitimate smell. Did you order them? Same one Rogan uses?
I just ordered them online. It's called Ward Bottled Insanity Premium Smelling Salts. So this is what you got to do, right? You got to take the lid off and then stick it under your nose and take in a big breath.
All right.
Through your nose.
Are you going first?
No, you go first.
I'll go first. Yeah, of course. Ready? So what do we got here?
No, put it straight under.
Okay.
Don't be a wimp.
Whoa, that woke me up. Your turn. I'm waiting for him to say absolutely not. Here we go.
All right, hold on.
For the camera kids.
I'm a little bit scared.
Oh,
all right.
Go. Wow.
That's brutal. I got to get these out of here.
Let's just hope you didn't order that from China and that's come from some weird factory. Oh my goodness. Hope everybody online enjoyed that.
Oh, God.
So, did you want to talk about Joe, or did you just want to ease me into the smelling salts?
It was just the smelling salts I wanted to get to.
Hey, you know what's mate? What is Joe Rogan's allure? What do you think is so attractive about Joe Rogan that he has the largest podcast in the world?
Good question. I think it's a few things. I think it's timing. He was not first in, but he was very early to it. I think it's consistency. 3 podcasts a week, 3 hours a week, keeps doing it. But beyond that, like if it was crap, it wouldn't work. So what makes it so good? I've gone off it.
Okay.
But if you go pre-pandemic, this is what I think happened with the Joe Rogan podcast. This is just my opinion.
So before you do, you gave me two macro timing market answers. So what is it about Joe?
Yeah. I'm going to get to that.
Get there, all right.
So you go pre-pandemic, and he was, to me, a very positive, very relatable, just genuine guy, just a sort of lovable buffoon. And I think people like genuine people, like the people who have the courage just to be themselves. I think people really like it. And then COVID happened. And I used to listen to it before COVID, and then COVID happened, and I then just heard this shift where, to begin with, it was super positive, and then it just became really whingy and a lot more conspiratorial. And it for me, I used to listen to them all the time, and I'd leave pumped up. I'm like, how good was that? And then it just started getting too whingy for me, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore.
Got into politics a lot more. Hey, he talks about politics a lot now.
Yeah,
a lot. But what I think is interesting is the spread of what is so attractive is the spread of people that he has come on. Mm-hmm. He'll talk to anybody. And some people won't talk to anybody. They only talk to someone who's left wing or right wing or only moderates or whatever it is. Whereas he'll talk to literally anybody, from comedians to MMA to politicians to movie stars to your average to your average Joe that he's pulled up because it's got some sort of, there you go, average Joe,
no
but it's
pun
got
intended.
But so somebody who's maybe big in one community, but he wants to elevate them, but he's incredibly open-minded. He's incredibly open-minded, and he'll listen to anyone and he'll talk to anybody. I think that's incredible. And sure, he's gone down that path a little bit, but I think living in the States, you're going to be affected by your environment. And with all the crazy COVID stuff that went on, all the people moving to Texas, when it's so much in your environment, there's the old biblical thing that says, out of the mouth, the heart speaks. And so that's his world now, is hearing all that stuff from people who are more right-leaning or whatever it is that are pushing back against government mandates and all that stuff. That's why he talks about it, because it's his world. So...
Yeah. Well, I see that here. So going Melbourne to Queensland during COVID. So I moved up here mid-COVID. And now having the business in both places and going back and forth. And you can't explain to a Queenslander just how bad it was in Melbourne.
Yep.
Like there's no collection of noises that you can put out of your mouth which will convey to them how bad it was. Like just the gradual eroding of your rights.
Yeah.
But it didn't happen overnight, right? It happened slowly. It happened bit by bit till, well, for me, one day I woke up and I'm like, I can't survive like this. And then, after I left, it went on for another twice that.
Yep.
So you can't explain that to people in Queensland.
No.
But similarly, you can't explain to people in Melbourne that they're the only ones who went through it.
Yeah.
Because everyone in Melbourne, the same as when I was there, you're just like, well, it's COVID, like everyone's going through it. Not like that.
Yeah.
And then
What do they call that? There's a term for that.
Stockholm Syndrome?
Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah.
And living in Melbourne, living through all of that, being there through everything, I never escaped any of it, is and seeing the curfews and then seeing the kids' parks and having young kids and not being able to go to the park with them because they chained everything up. And just all this. And you go out and then it was like, okay, well, you got to wear a mask when you're walking outdoors. And if you don't, you're going to be stopped. And then cops wanted to check your phone to see how long you've been out of your house for, all this type of stuff. And you think, man, and then you're talking to Queenslanders, they're like, oh, no, it's all good up here. It's like, yeah, we had a little bit of that. But
a little bit of a lockdown. Everyone went to the beach.
That's right. Exactly. And so we lived through all that. But then to see how many people will rationalise and justify it, I'm so glad we talked about this. I was sitting in a cafe on Bridge Road in Richmond in May 2022. And I wouldn't call it PTSD. Maybe you could, but I had a hangover from COVID, that whole thing. And I drive through certain areas. I drive through Bridge Road in Richmond where they had all the big protests and all the stuff was going on with the riders. And it took me ages to be able to drive down that street without that memory being triggered by that. And so I'm sitting in a cafe with a gentleman and I said to him, man, I just can't seem to just shake the last 18 months. Like it's still with me all the time, all the stuff we went through. And I said, I just can't understand where society went with it all. And I started talking to him about the idea of, security and freedom and this and that. And he said to me, well, you know what I observed through that whole period? He said, people say that they want freedom. Everyone say, yeah, I want freedom. I want to be free. But in reality, people value feeling secure more than they do being free. And what the government did in Victoria, it made people feel secure whilst taking away pretty much all their freedoms.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Isn't that fascinating though, from a psychological point of view?
Yeah.
Here's freedom, but I'd rather, as a majority, I'd rather feel secure. I'd rather the government looks after me and makes me feel secure. Whereas that's why you see the entrepreneurial world, there's only a percentage of people that will really take that risk and go out there like you have and set up this. Look at the amount of money you spent on this podcast studio just to add value to your clients. I came in here, I'm like, how much was this setup? And he told me, and I was like, man, I hope you got a good ROI on that. And he goes, well, it adds value to the clients, but that takes risk. That takes risk to do that. People would rather feel secure and have a job than take the risk of dumping X amount of dollars into this studio just so you could add value and another layer to the clients.
I got a friend in Melbourne. So when COVID happened, this is my experience of COVID. So COVID happened, and when it first happened, I remember I was still racing pro triathlon, and I was due to go and race in Dubai, and then the flights got shut down. And there was just like this eerie feeling of something coming. Like nothing had actually gone on, but there was just all of this noise. And I remember, to begin with, in Melbourne, everyone banded together. Like I've never felt like part of such a big community. Like you would go out and everyone would everyone banded together. It's a feeling. It's hard to describe.
Unity.
Yeah. And then as it went on and, the 2 weeks turned into 2 months, into 2 years, whatever. And then I watched it like splinter, and then people started turning against each other.
Yep.
And it was neighbour against neighbour, and it was really, really horrible. And I remember I had this friend who was the owner of quite a prominent nightclub in Melbourne. And I saw him on Facebook, and, over time, I watched the posts that he was putting on Facebook get angrier and more conspiratorial and whatever. And I'm not passing judgment on any of that, but it's just my experience of what I saw happen with this guy. And then I saw him at the freedom marches that happened in Melbourne. And, he was happy, like he was smiling, like he was finally able to take control of his life back. And then there was a post that went on Facebook that said, I won't say this guy's name, but this person's name, beloved husband of whoever and rada of kids, was rushed to hospital on this night and died of complications caused by COVID. It was a lot longer than that, but you get the drift.
Yep.
And I read it to begin with, and I was like, that's a really sick sense of humour from this guy to write that when it hasn't happened. And then I realised it did happen. Like he did die. Died in his early 40s. And, the last thing I saw of this guy was, him happy and feeling like he was taking his life back. And, a lot of opinions fly around about COVID and, vaccine camp and all of that.
It's crazy.
And when all of that, and there's a lot of that in Queensland, like it's very strong up here. I mean, it's very strong in Melbourne as well. Anyway, by the by, none of that stuff matters when I think about my mate and, his wife and 2 kids that will never see him again. And, that was the seriousness of COVID and COVID in Melbourne. I can't tell you another story like that I know from Queensland, although I'm sure they exist. And it's crazy. And then you talk about the COVID hangover. I think the COVID hangover is PTSD. Right. And I started going back and forth from Melbourne quite some time ago. And just the difference in mindset between Queensland and Victoria was crazy. So for people, Queensland at the moment is thumping along. Isn't it? Lots of people making lots of money, lots of positivity. Like the place is going ahead. Yep. Property prices are going off, which is really difficult for first home buyer clients. But, most people have got a good job and are doing well. Most people. And most people are positive about the future here.
Yep.
Where in Melbourne, although it's beginning to get better, like it was the exact opposite of that. Heaps of people were out of work. Everyone had a bit of PTSD. There was heaps of negativity. And then, we're in the property game and you can see that in the property market. And then the government decided to go after the property market.
Land tax.
Yeah, to repay the COVID bill, which, look, in my opinion...
And they did that with payroll tax too.
Yeah. Yep. Just make a hard situation harder. But the point is, Melbourne now is either the 4th or 5th most expensive city in the country, which is just a statistical anomaly right? It shouldn't be there. Melbourne is, if you look historically at the data, Melbourne remains between sort of equal to and kind of 80% of Sydney's price. Sydney leads the country, but Melbourne follows close behind. Now, Melbourne is about to become Australia's most populous city. God, a lot of talking. Give me one second.
It's a great place to live. Very livable.
So it's about to become Australia's largest city in before 2050, I believe. It is absolutely impossible for it to continue the way it is. And the conversation that I'm trying to have, or that we're trying to have with first home buyers in Melbourne, is you don't understand how affordable this place is. Like you can get, depending where it is. I mean, we're selling a couple of townhomes down there at the moment, brand new, 550,000. You can't get a one-bedroom apartment up in Queensland for that.
That's right.
It shouldn't be that way, and it won't be that way, and it's not going to last. And I'm seeing the rumblings in the property market. So we're seeing investors start to come back in. They're always the first, and then it gets going. Melbourne is going to come good, in my opinion, somewhere between the next 6 to 18 months. But it will happen overnight. And for first home buyers who are down there, I'm saying to them, like, now is your opportunity. Where, it's kind of the opposite up here. I'm talking to land developers up here going, hey, boys, it's not going to last like this forever. Be nice to us.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know what started me off on that monologue, but we're here now.
But it's great because you're right. Melbourne is an incredible place. It's got the culture. It's got all the trimmings, lifestyle, everything. I mean, Queensland. It's amazing. The Gold Coast blows my mind because I used to live up here, and how much this place has been developed and grown since 2011 when I left. And property prices up here, man. Like friends of mine bought apartments down in Kirra, like apartments, not even land, apartments down there, and then doubled their money on the apartments in that 2019 boom. So when it really skyrocketed, these guys bought them for like, I don't know, 500 grand, and it was worth $1 million. That's in a couple of years, that's pretty significant, right? That's significant, but they caught the boom, right? And now it's obviously flourishing, and you've got rental issues up here and so on. But you're right, Melbourne's got everything going for it. So I can see us buying a property down there for sure. Let's talk about that.
Speaking of you buying properties, Are you prepared to discuss this in such a public forum?
Oh, but yeah, of course. It's fine.
Talk me through your property buying journey.
So macro level property. So we started investing back in 2017, I think it was, in a commercial property fund, which is where someone in Brisbane who we've known for 3 decades plus, family wise, has commercial property. So that was my first foray into property. Percentage return on funds and whatever it was. So that was our macro experience. But then
stay on that for a second, because I have some opinions here, but I want to ask some questions. What if you don't mind me asking? Actually, for the listeners, so a commercial property fund is, I'm assuming, it's basically a unit trust. So you buy a share of this business, and the business goes out and buys commercial properties, and then you get a share of the profit.
Yep. Sure.
What sort of percentage return would you get on that year on year?
Probably, I would say straight return. It changed a little bit with COVID. They had to adjust it, as you can imagine, with commercial properties and so on. But I'd say between 8 and 9%.
Okay.
Yeah, so and the capital growth on any property that's sold within it, and that's happened, and that has grown the amount of money that we have.
Yeah. So let's say you're getting 9%, right? So because I invest, right, and I invest in different things. So I invest in shares. I clearly invest in property, and I actually had a mate of mine who do industrial properties. So big, huge things that cost hundreds of millions of dollars. He's like, you can put some money in this if you want, probably 15% return per year over 5 years. I'm like, that's amazing. And then I thought about it, and this is what I thought. When you buy, and I'm going to keep these numbers round, and I'm going to keep them very simple. I understand there's more to it, but just for the purpose of this. So if I've got $100,000, and that was a hell of a crack in your neck. I was worried your neck was going to come off.
Not at all.
So if I've got $100,000 and I invest it in your family member's fund.
Yep.
I'm going to get a return of $9,000.
Family friend, yep.
Yeah, whatever. Sorry, not whatever, but
Know what
yeah.
you mean, yep.
Or if I invested it with my mate who reckoned he was going to get a bigger return, 15%, so I get $15,000.
Yep.
Okay. If I take $100,000 and I buy a residential property, I'm going to get a loan of probably $900,000 on top.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm investing $1 million.
Yep.
And if that residential property goes up by 5%, that's $50,000.
Mm-hmm.
When I put in 100,000,
Yep.
that's literally 50% on my money. Or if it does what properties have done some of these years, like if it went up by 20%, that's $200,000.
Yeah.
And it's this thing with leverage where I can't find anything that has beaten residential property once you put in the leverage. Now, there's heaps more that goes into this. Like, obviously, you've got lender's mortgage insurance, interest rate, all of that. But just as a basic principle as an investment, nothing I've invested in, I have made more money out of that I've kept other than property.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. Property's incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. So that for me, but I remember I didn't put 200 straight, and I was able to put smaller amounts into that.
Yep.
And then, of course, then to get a return on that every quarter. And then I've taken money out of that as well, and then put it into different investments. Mm-hmm. And so that was the entry level experience. And then I've invested into, I got into the crypto market back in 2014, in and out of that, back and forth and so on all the way through. And that's
Have you made money?
Until yeah, I mean, absolutely, I had.
Do you know? Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Yeah, I had made money and taken profit out of my investments from 2014 through to 2021.
Talking about your crypto here specifically.
Yep, that's what I'm talking about.
And then
so
what happened in 21?
Sold Bitcoin, bought Bitcoin, sold Bitcoin all the way from 2014 to 2017. Right at the top, I'd sold it and back and forth. And then in 2020, it's actually 2022, sorry, end of 2022, I had some Bitcoin, a bunch of Ethereum, and then I got put onto a fund that was paying. There's a term for it. My brother knows it, who works with you, where they were paying 2.5% per week, hyper compounded. We'd done all this research into it, looked at it, had different people I knew that invested into it too. Anyway, it turns out that was a complete rug pull. The dude disappeared with the money when the FTX thing happened. Used that as a cover for Binance supposedly holding the money. They weren't. We later found out, and I no longer have any cryptocurrency. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to share that because what's interesting is through that whole journey there of in and out, I was into the market early, back and forth. But what happened is the same thing that happens to every human at some point. It's whether they act on it or not, is they get greedy. And I got greedy. And I decided I want to get a quicker return. A few of my mates were doing it as well. I want to get a quicker return on my investment. And so I did the one thing you never do in the crypto market. I gave up my keys. So they say you're literally giving up the keys. And so I gave it to this fund. They were paying it. Now I knew people at that point who'd taken their money out of it. And what's funny enough is my father, in end of 2022 in December, I said to him, I just think I might take this money out of this fund. I'm just not feeling like, he said to me, half of good investing is not losing. Warren Buffett quote. He said, just take your winnings. Sure, it's not going to be as much as some of your other mates that are going to stay in it and whatever it is. And you know what I did? I didn't listen.
Doubled down.
I did. No. I just left it in there. I thought, you know what? It's all good. I left it in there, and then of course that got rug pulled, and that's disappeared. We're actually in a class action to try and get it back. The dude's in jail currently in Dubai and whatever. But a couple of things I learned in that, because for me that's the cheapest lesson I'll ever learn. That's a growth mindset. Growth mindset is I can look at that and go, okay, what did I learn from that? What is the pain plus reflection equals progress principle in this? Is it okay? I was doing well if I had a bought and hold. But what did I do? I got excited, got ahead of myself. Thankfully, I'd taken some money out of that, invested that into property a little bit before it, taken out half of some of my Bitcoin and so on, which was crazy at the time because it was at 90 or 100,000 per Bitcoin. And I took half of Bitcoin out and I invested it into a property fund. So there were some good moves made in that. But then gave the money to someone, or as my dad, who as a boomer said, you mean you gave money to someone you don't know on the internet? Gave money to someone, and now, of course, there's nothing there. What did I learn from it, though? Greed, ego, FOMO, surefire ways to lose money. So I'm actually glad that it happened because it made me tighten up.
It's interesting, though, because like greed, ego, FOMO, I mean, That's also how you make money as well. It's
Of course
like
it is.
two sides of the same coin.
But thanks for bringing that up and discussing it. Now let's talk about the property.
So your obviously your old man passing away, I know about that, which is really sad.
Yep.
So I'm really sorry to hear
Thank
it.
you. Yeah.
How are you coping okay?
Yeah, I'm all right. First week and a half was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're drowning in grief, but then as the time goes on, it's like waves, right? At the start, you're drowning in the waves, and then you learn to paddle a bit better. You got people around you; they're going to lift you up. You know, you're going to have to find different ways to bring yourself back to the surface. And then, you know, week 2 and week 3, I'm in week 3 now, and you know, there's less waves. I was in Service Paradise before. I was looking at where we used to live as a family in an apartment building. Get a little bit emotional, but I'm not drowning in it. You know, the wave just comes. And so, yeah, I'm doing well.
Yeah, I get that. I think, it's a funny thing. It's like it never gets better. You just kind of get used to it and you get better at handling it.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
life, though.
As
my dad said before he passed, probably a year before he passed, picked up our youngest, looked at her and said, and looked at her for a while, and they said, "What are you looking at, Dad?" And he said, "It's the circle of life, isn't it?"
Yeah.
Because it is. It's the circle of life, and we'll all be gone one day. You know? But it's what we leave behind, and our lessons and our principles, and hopefully we leave some assets to help people get along in this highly inflated world. So he did that.
Yeah, well, that's it, right? Like 140 years from now, everyone you know will be dead. All the stuff you own, someone else will have it. Like, yeah, all this crap that, you know, well, for me anyway, I'm mindlessly run after. And like, I love a lot of what we do, but there's also some of it I'm just literally chasing things that don't matter.
140 years from now, everyone you know will be dead.
Everyone.
Incredible. And what, we might make that 180 if there's some breakthroughs in technology?
Yeah.
True,
Yeah.
right?
Would you live forever if you could?
No,
Oh, controversial. Why not?
definitely not.
Why not?
Because I don't think this is the best life. I think we live an incredible life here, but I actually think that there's an afterlife that we go to. That's what I believe. I was watching, one of the things that brought me a lot of peace in the last couple of weeks was watching videos of people on YouTube talking about their near-death experiences. And some of them are moving and gripping. And because my wife had a terrible car accident 18 years ago, and she should have died. Like, you know, the steering wheel, there was no airbag, steering wheel 100 kilometres an hour into another car, steering wheel through the chin, took her teeth through a navel cavity, broken leg. She still has issues with her ankle, and had facial reconstruction, all that. And she was laying there and saw herself in the rearview mirror and started to feel like she was passing out. And the white light came from her. You heard about the white light? Why have we all heard about the white light? Because it's clearly a thing. The white light comes and it takes you. So where's it taking us? So I watched some of these videos and people had these experiences. Now, one guy was selling a book, so I put his to the side. And I went, okay, because he wanted to tell more of it in the book. And I like, okay, I'll put you in the corner. But I listened to all of these people, someone who was a paramedic, you know, and he said he got to meet his guardian angels. It doesn't matter whether you believe in religion or not, or God or no God or whatever, but his guardian angels came. And then one of them was actually one who, it was his intuition. The voice that said, don't do this, or that's a bad idea. It was actually one of his guardian angels. So I'm watching all this stuff, and I'm, you know, the older I get, I'm 38, and I think, you know, like where my dad went to was a better place. It was a better place, a place of tranquility, peace, and being reunited with other people. So, but you don't need to believe that, but I do.
I had a near-death experience.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, very bad one. And what happened in my near-death experience was it sounds weird when you retell these things, but what happened in my mind's eye was I lived my life in the third person in fast forward, and it would get to pivotal moments in my life, and I would go a different way to what I went, and then I would get to the end of it, like to the end of my life, and I'd die, and dying was the most painful thing in the world. And then I'd be reborn, but in the dying and being reborn, like I would wake up, like I'd like come back for a second, and I wouldn't be breathing, and I'd start breathing again, and then I'd go off. And anyway, this kept happening and happening and happening. And then when I was in the bit between dying and being reborn in my head, there was nothing. There was nothing. I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he said, well, there was something because you were there. But yeah, it was just dark.
Remarkable.
Yeah, and then so it kept happening where, you know, my life in fast forward in the third person watching it, pivotal moment in my life, different decision made, live that life all the way through till I died. And then I got to one of them, I got to now, like the present moment where I was dying. And I had a choice to either die or not die. And I just remembered, like in my head, I'm like, I'm not ready. I don't want to go. And yeah, I came back.
And here we are.
Yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
So do I think that death is nothing as a result of that? I tell you what, I really don't want it to be. Like I would love to think that there was more to this. Like life just feels like there's some secret that's like on the tip of your tongue that you can't quite say. Like nothing, we just accept all of this stuff, right? Like space just goes on forever and it's out there. But if you think, you're like, it doesn't make sense. There's got to be, surely there's some sort of key that someone can give you where you're like, oh, now my life makes sense.
Does your life make sense?
Does my life make sense? Does my life make sense? My life makes the sense that I make of it. Oh, fucking mic drop like that. I would have two answers to that. The first answer is none of this makes any fucking sense. But then in the same sort of way, it all kind of does make sense. Like I feel like I'm almost on this, God help anyone who wanted to listen about homes on this, but I feel like I'm on this preordained path that sometimes I get off, but when I get on the right path, like everything sort of clicks into place.
Of course, flow, right?
So in that way, it kind of makes sense, but I don't know, what about you? Does your life make sense?
Absolutely it does.
Oh, that's very confident.
Absolutely makes sense.
That's almost so confident it's got to be covering up some insecurity.
No, but the thing is,
what did you do with your water, mate?
It's there. It's out there.
Yeah.
It's all right. But it makes total sense to me because I've spent the last 16 years of my life making sense of it to a point where I get it. And I understand my purpose and what I'm doing. Like if you think about every person has sort of 4 levels of drivers. We all start out with a basic sense of security. So we're trying to be secure. You know, you're trying to survive. You speak to clients like this all the time. And the second level that we get to is where we're chasing status. Oh, I don't want 1 property. I want 2 properties. I want a Louis Vuitton bag. I want to look pretty. I need this thing or that watch or whatever it is, or this private school with 3 Latin words, 10 grand for every word per year. And then I move from that to freedom, which is now I'm chasing financial freedom or I want work freedom or whatever it is. And then the last one's purpose. And so we all go through these, but some people don't get past them. They get stuck at certain ones. They spend their whole life chasing looking good or chasing. I see this. My kids go to a private school in Melbourne. And I can see for some people the status is really important. It's actually more important than purpose. They've never got to that. Whereas I feel like I've worked my way through these to now a point where I feel like I've got some level of freedom, personal freedom, not just talking money freedom, personal freedom, where I'm not really as nearly as insecure as I used to be. I'm not driven by chronic insecurity. I'm actually driven by something completely different, which is connection and love. And now I'm in this space where I'm really pulled by this purpose that I have to carry on my family legacy, to work in my business because I get so much fulfillment, to work on my relationship with my wife because when we're in a great space, man, nothing can beat us. It's like a force multiplier. My relationship with my kids, which is a long-term investment, but I see the investment that paid off with my relationship with my dad, and so I want to carry that on to the next generation. And in the middle of all that, I want to make some good investments, probably buy some properties and do some good things that are going to leave some money behind for the kids and assets that lock them up.
You know, the longer I go on in this caper, like just the life caper, the less certain I am of anything. Mm-hmm. Like I make decisions, and I make decisions with more confidence. And I feel things are the right direction. Like I really like what we do as a business. You know, all of our stuff. I think they do. I'm the boss. They probably just tell me this, but you know, our staff really love it.
They do.
They do. They get to do work, which is very, very rewarding. Our clients, obviously, we make their dreams come true. Try and make an impact in the greater world as well. You know, we support housing projects overseas. So, like from that point of view, I'm just like, you know, it feels like I'm on the right path, but I'm just not certain of necessarily anything.
Well, we can't be certain of anything, really, can we? We can feel certain, but are we truly certain? Like I feel pretty certain that I've got a bit of a grasp on life and some of the basics as I've gotten older, but I'm not certain that I'm going to go here or this is going to play out this way. It's like, it's just a day at a time approach. It's a day at a time approach, but it's also living with some level of faith. People think that faith is related to God. It's not. Fear is believing in the unknown. Fear is that, oh man, the property market's gonna pop, and you know, this is going to go through the roof, and it's all going to fall. That's just fear, believing in something you've never seen. Whereas faith is exactly the same thing. Things are actually going pretty well. Do I want to be conservative and make sure my finances are in place? Sure, but faith is I'm believing in something that's not seen yet. So it's the same thing. It's just the meaning we attach to it. Deep chat, Leigh.
Let's talk about this property.
Cool. Icing. Let's put that cherry on the top.
So talk to me. So you invested. You lost all of your money in crypto.
I lost some money, not all my money. Don't worry. It's interesting. We've only talked about, and I don't want to go into the wins, but we have magnified that there's a loss here or this thing there or whatever. But all of this is the part of the game of investing. There's going to be losses and then there's going to be wins, and it's just part of the game.
Yeah, it's part of learning.
But
for
then
sure.
It leads to 2022. In January 2022, I'd made a bunch of money, had some big bonuses come in and that type of stuff, and I thought I've always wanted to get into the residential property market.
Why?
And own my own home, because owning an investment property was something I wanted to do. I thought I would like to have a property portfolio at some point.
Why?
And the why is because I thought, well, over time, if I buy my first property, this was the thing, if I buy my first property and I get good capital growth in that property, I can buy a second one. And of course, they're going to be negatively geared, but over time, I'm going to have good equity in these properties, but I want to get some good rental returns on it and so on. That was the thinking back then. Capital
growth, negative gearing, equity. Explain what you mean by these things.
Well, if I buy a property and say it's $1 million property, but I put up a certain percentage of that, 20%, then I'm going to borrow 80%, and then I'm going to buy a property. Unfortunately, I personally, and you are welcome to correct me, I don't like negative gearing. I think that the whole concept of, in the 60s and 70s in the history of negative gearing, you go and you buy a property and immediately, from an investment point of view, I buy a property and I lose money on it, or I'm going backwards with money on it. So I bought this property in Wynnum back in 2022 when interest rates were 2.5%. And that's when I committed myself to buying it. That was an apartment that was off the plan that was going to be built in 2 years. And it was like, great, this is going to be awesome. This could go heaps. This could go up heaps in value. What I should have done at the time, because of my two options, I should have bought the place that was built in Hawthorne in Victoria, straight off the plan there. Now, it's questionable whether I should be buying off the plan or land or whatever it was. It was the options I had presented to me at the time. And I wanted to get into the property market. I wanted to own my own investment property. So I'm going to buy a property. And the next thing you know, I buy this one in Wynnum. And because interest rates have now gone up to 7%, I'm seeing $1,500 a month going out the door with that property. I'm covering the gap between what the renter is paying and what I'm paying the bank.
Okay, let's just rewind a bit. So you get this place in Wynnum. You buy it off the plan.
Yep.
It then obviously needs to get built. Take us through the process that happened. What did you buy? You bought an apartment?
Yeah, I bought a really nice, really nice apartment too. It's everybody who's walked into it said the fittings, this is a remarkable apartment. Brand new building in Wynnum overlooking the water. The idea was the Olympics are coming up in 2030, so you're going to be buying this. The value of the property is going to go up over time. Over 10 years, it could go up $1 million in value, that type of stuff. So bought it for $880 off the plan. Put up a decent deposit, 20% deposit, lender's insurance, all the stuff. The property got built as it's halfway through the build. Of course, the interest rates start flying through the roof, inflation goes through the roof, and timing.
So what's going on in your head where interest rates are at 2% and then they jack up to 7% over, what, like a year and a half?
Yep, that
What-
sucks.
Yeah. What's going through your mind?
Buyer's remorse. Buyer's remorse. Should I have bought this? I asked him, can I say get out of this, but can I sell this? Can I sell this? And no, you can't. There was all these restrictions around it, of course, as you can imagine. But then it was like, okay, we have to adjust our finances to when there's lands. We're going to be coming up with a lot more than we initially budgeted for. Yeah, and so that stuff back at what I wanted initially was I wanted to buy property. I wanted to see the capital growth grow in that. Meaning, if I bought it for $1 million or 880, for example, I'm already seeing it now. I looked at the value of it. It's gone up 120,000 since I bought it. Maybe you could throw your little piece on that of how that's matched with inflation. But it's already gone up in value since the price that I bought it for. But I settled on it in April this year. I came up with the rest of the money through the bank and so on. Paid them $880, and now last week I got a valuation on it. It's worth $1 million. So that was settled on in April, and that's where it is now. But I committed to it for $880 in 2022 in January. So I wanted the capital growth in it, because if I have capital growth, meaning if I bought it for $880 and it's worth $1 million, there's the 120 in that I could borrow against to buy another property, and then start to get a property portfolio. That was the thinking that I had.
Okay. How's it worked out?
Well, I look at it and I go, okay, well, I've done some other investments in the meantime that I've seen work out pretty well, but I've got a property at the moment I've got to come up with the gap every month of $1,500 every month. I've got a tenant in there, but they're not willing to pay for it. What I'm paying for it. See, that for me, I'm like, man, this is wild. Like the whole concept of negative gearing, where I'm going to take the loss on that. And when I rang the guy and said, I want to sell it, he said, man, if you just hang on to that for a couple of years, this thing could go up. And that's the dance, isn't it, in residential investment properties? It's like if I can take that, now I get a tax benefit from that. That's why I initially did it. This was the whole thing, Leigh. If I go back to capital growth and so on, I get an $18,000 a year tax benefit in my personal tax with that property. That was an allure. Later, as I matured and realised a few things, it's like, I don't really need an $18,000 tax write-off for what I'm having to pay on this property. So how's it working out for me? Well, I got a property that's got a tenant in it. It's going okay. There's $1,500 that I'm lighter in the pocket every single month, but I can say I got a property. Now I fit in better in Australia. If I could go back, would I have bought the one in Hawthorn? For sure.
Why would you have bought the one in Hawthorn?
Because it was already built straight off the plan. I would have had 2 years at a better interest rate. I would have had more than that. I would have had 2.5 years at a better interest rate based on the advice I had at that time.
What was the thing in Hawthorn?
An apartment, two-bedroom apartment. Yep, just like this one. This one's got a study and some nice finishings, pool on the top, all the stuff.
Have you had a look at the price of the one in Hawthorn, what it would be now?
No. No, I could.
It wouldn't be pretty.
No, it wouldn't bug me.
No, it wouldn't bug you in the slightest yet. So, yeah, when it comes to investing in property, when you buy a property, what goes up in value is the land, right? So it's the land that sits beneath the building, which is rising. The building itself is going down in value. So I say this a lot because it works well. So buildings are quite analogous to cars in that you drive it out of the dealership, it's worth 20% less, and then it keeps going down every day after that until eventually it needs to be demolished. So when you're talking about buying a home or buying residential property from an investment point of view, I would strongly recommend, and this is what I do, I would recommend to everyone that what you want to be buying is land, right? And when you buy an apartment, such a huge percentage of your purchase price is a building that it just makes it more challenging to make money. Now,
so can I tell you why I got shied off the land thing? And so what tripped me over that is back in, and you can unpack this, is they said that if it's not within 15 kilometres of the city, and this lady was giving examples of it, if it's not within the 15 kilometre range of a city, what you're going to find is you can buy a property for 500 and 10, 15 years later, it can be worth 560. And she said that's not capital growth working in your favour. And she gave a couple of examples of that, of ones out at Werribee in Melbourne, these type of places that were way out. And I say a couple of examples, like two I'm talking about, because that's all she could speak to that she owned.
Yeah.
And she showed ones that were closer in that were land, but then the further you got out, the likely capital growth was lower. That's what I was told at the time.
Yep.
And so I bought into that, and I got the concept that, okay, why do only a certain amount of Australians have 3 or 4 properties, like investment properties? I mean, you get that percentage, like a lot have one, like 80-something% have one. Then you get into 2 and 3 and 4, and it just trims right down. And she was explaining the reason that happens is the first one they buy, they don't get enough capital growth in it to even get into the second. Mm-hmm. Would you say that's accurate? 2 parts to that. This is the last part I said in the first part, 15K range.
The reason... Okay, let's begin with the reason why most people don't have more than one investment property. I agree, they buy the wrong sort. And when you buy property, your property needs to give you cash flow and capital growth.
Yep.
So you can, if you want to get the best capital growth in the world, just buy a block of land. Just don't put anything on it, just have a block of land. The issue is it's going to kill your cash flow because you've got to pay for that thing if you've got a loan on it. So if you look at your situation, Dom, with your apartment, you're like, this is great. I've got this apartment. It's gone up in value a bit. I'm having to shell out $1,500 a month for it.
Yeah.
So what is going to get you out of that situation if you were to choose to get out? What would push you to sell that property would be it costs too much. Now imagine if you had 4 of those and it's costing you $6,000 a month. That's $72,000 a year. That's $100,000, in before tax dollars. That, I mean, most people aren't earning enough to do that.
Yeah.
So that is so why do people only buy one property? They buy the wrong sort of property. I agree with that.
Which is why you have a business that helps people with their first home.
Yeah. I mean, look, when you buy your first home, part of it is definitely an investment decision. I mean, it's the biggest purchase that most people are ever going to make in their life. But it's also a very emotional decision as well.
Huge.
So yeah, you're going to have your kids in here. Like it's probably not going to be your forever home, your first home, but it's going to be your home for long enough.
And you want to buy one that has capital growth, that when you do buy your next home, you bought the right one so that you're going to get some value when you sell it, because you're not paying capital gains on it, right?
Yep.
Whereas I'm looking at selling the one up in Queensland at the moment, up in Wynnum, I should say, and hopefully not pay 50% capital gains, likely not to, but you pay a chunk, it'll be 25% capital gains on that property.
Yep.
So that 120 sounds great until it's 60 after fees. Oh, I might actually
Get
break
30.
even.
Yeah.
I could break even. I could make 20.
You could lose a bit of dosh too. Yeah. Anyway.
But we live and we learn.
So I want to answer those 2 questions because they were good questions. So the first one was about why, and it's the wrong property choice. The second question was the 15Ks from the city. I challenge anyone, please send me data that shows me that buying in a city has a better percentage capital growth rate than buying mid-ring or outer. And I can't find it. I've got an uncle who taught me about investing really early on. He's got a place in Brighton. He's had it for 30 years, worth a whole heap of dosh, real blue chip suburb. I think if you asked anyone, is Brighton in Melbourne a good suburb?
Beautiful.
Definitely. Good investment.
Lots of break-ins, but beautiful.
There's lots of good stuff to steal. So we looked at his annual capital growth rate over the entire life of that property. And it was average. It's like, I forget exactly now. It was like 5% or something.
Wow.
But as a dollar value, it looks huge, right? It's millions, literally millions. But as a percentage, it's small. And then we looked at, Melton's one that comes up for me all the time because I almost bought a place there and then didn't. It would have been my first investment. But Melton doubled in a year. Literally went from 300 to 600 in a year.
Incredible.
Now, again, you've got to look at this over a long enough period of time, but more what my point is, no one can show me long-term data that shows inner ring suburbs on a percentage basis going up more than mid or outer ring, but they definitely look better for headlines.
Of course.
The other thing that I'd say is property is a pyramid. So at the top of the pyramid, there's less demand because there's less people buying it.
Of course.
We're down the bottom. There's a heap of demand because more people can afford it. And you will find that it is much easier for a property to go up to the median house price than it is to zoom past it. So my opinion is you don't want to be buying trophy properties as an investment. Yeah, it's great to say, oh, I've got the house in Brighton, but if it's really purely from an investment point of view, I'm not sure it works out.
I would agree with that. I think the other side around that, though, is that property I bought in Wynnum, if I was just to buy and hold that will go up in value over time. Was it the best purchase?
Will it, though?
I think it will.
Why?
Because of the quality of place that it is. The location of place that it is. That's not very far from the city. Not to say the 15-kilometre range.
Yeah.
You've got the Olympics coming in 2030. I was shown a heap of data that after the Olympics, the uplift of any sort of city and the property value that goes up. Will it be more than 880? Of course it will. It already is. Will it reach the 2 million that they reckon within 10 years? I'm not sure about that. I think that might be a stretch. But could a really nice 2-bedroom with a study apartment with all the fixtures and everything be worth 1.2, 1.5? What do you think? You're the property expert.
I think if you had a conversation with all of the apartment owners in the Docklands, South Bank, inner city Melbourne at the moment, they would be telling you to be very, very careful.
I would agree with you on that because I have friends that live in the Docklands and they say it's a ghost town. And I spoke to a friend the other day who has a multi-million-dollar apartment in the Docklands. They bought 23 years ago, and he said it's marginally gone up in value. I'm like, dude, that looks into Etihad Stadium, Marvel Stadium. It is lush. In saying that area is not a ghost town, and there's a lot of retirees. And he said the main people that are buying those type of places are downsizing. The people with a bit more money, they're downsizing from a big family home, kids have moved out, and they're moving into... That's why this place, I reckon it would sell pretty quickly if we put it on the market. But the idea is over time to hold it in the value of as it goes up and then buy a second one, a third one, a fourth one. So...
Yeah. Look, if you're asking me, will that property go up in value? Yeah, it could do, and it probably will. Is there a chance that it just stays stagnant? Yeah, that happens with their apartments. Is there a chance that it could go down in value? Yeah, that happens with apartments. All the same things can happen if you've got your own block of land. It's just far less likely and not really what I see in my experience.
Which is why you don't tip people into apartments, you tip them into land.
Oh, we don't do apartments for first home buyers. It's too risky.
Of course,
so
that's what I mean.
You buy it now, you've got to put down, they often want like a 10% deposit now. And then in 2 or 3 years' time, when the thing's completed and you've actually got to settle on it, if you can't get your loan approved, you lose your money. And for a first home buyer, that's their entire life savings. So we can't do that. We do everything.
So risky, hey?
Yeah.
Yep.
We do everything subject to finance. You just have to. You have to. If you're a first home buyer, even if you're not a first home buyer, but you need to mitigate your risk. Developers want guaranteed sales. Your salesperson gets paid off the deposit that you pay.
That's right. So somebody told me a while back, the only people that make money out of apartments are developers. Smart guy, and he's sitting across the table. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Mate, tell me, have you been inside that apartment?
I'm not.
That's a shame.
I've done the virtual tours. I've done all the... Yeah, I've done the virtual tours, looked through it all, everything.
Yeah. What were your emotions when you went to purchase it?
When I did you mean the settlement this year?
No, to begin with, when you were looking at doing it. Were you scared?
No.
No?
No, not really scared.
No, you? Kahunas of steel.
No, not really. Well, I already played in the investing world.
Yeah.
And I'd already seen money go up and down and made some money here and then had those type of things happen. So, no, not really. No, pretty okay risk tolerance.
Yeah.
But I was buying a property. It was pretty well measured. We did all the numbers on it. We nearly bought 2.
Did you?
We nearly bought that and Hawthorn.
Interesting.
And then something, both of us, we were like, nah, we're exposing ourselves too much here. Because we had enough money at the time for a deposit for 2 easy. And so we were like, why don't we just bang out two. And they were, I tell you what, the property company we were talking with were more than happy to sell us two.
Yeah, I bet they were.
Of course they were. So look, straight off the bat, even after we'd settled on the first, they said, what's your appetite for another one or two? They were ready. They're more than happy at any time, one phone call to sell me another property. That's okay. It's their business. But I said to them, no, we're just not in a spot where we want to do that. We would have over-leveraged ourselves. Yeah, actually, no, we could have afforded it still. We could still afford to do that, most definitely. But from a risk tolerance point of view, that wouldn't have been good. You know, we've got two properties now we're outlaying all this money to. Now we've got, you know, what have we got? $3,000 a month going out, or $4,000 depending on it. And you've got to come up with that every single month. And we had a couple of months this year where we had no tenant in there too. So I'm coming up with whatever it was, 4.8, 4.6, straight out the door every month. Now that's tolerable. You could afford that. I can afford that. But I don't want to have to.
Yeah, tolerable is not probably the right word. I wouldn't be happy about that.
Of course. And I will tell you this, Leigh.
Yep.
As we wrap this up, this is being a novice in this area, is that what I was told that would rent for was $150 less per week than what it rented for.
Yep. That's how this sort of thing goes down.
That's how it goes down.
Yeah.
But it's all good. This is all part of having an investment property. Like, there's things that you got to do and work around it. Will I hold on to it? Not sure. For the time being, probably. But I'm more likely to put money into different things.
I think what's really good, and I said this to you when we were talking about this a couple of months ago, where a couple of people in your life were giving you a pretty hard time about buying the apartment, and you, in my opinion, which you might not have been, but in my opinion, you were then starting to give yourself a hard time about it. I remember what I said to you then was what you've done, Dom, is what most people can't do, which is you've gotten over the fear and you've done something. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's 85% of it. So even if this wasn't the greatest investment in the world, who cares? And don't let it put you off doing things in future. Just learn from the lessons and then move on from there.
That's right.
But the fact that you've done anything, to me, I think is awesome, because,
of course,
you know, we deal with people every day who just, like, fear gets in the way.
Of course it does.
They get in their own way.
Doing something right. You got to have a crack. That's why with the crypto stuff, people go, "Oh man, you're this thing here," and I'm like, "Man, I was doing this for 2014. Do you know it took risks to meet people in car parks and change details with them and do this stuff to buy Bitcoin back in 2014? That was weird. You meet them in car parks and you'd have to exchange details and take photos of IDs and do this for him to pass his Bitcoin to me and back and forth. And I remember trying to use it in 2014. I'm buying beef ribs down at Third Wave Cafe in Port Melbourne. Those beef ribs today would be worth 10 grand.
Yeah.
Because we were trying to figure out what to do with the currency. It takes risks to do these things. But, you know, generational wealth starts with one risk taker. And if that's a risk to buy your own home, it's a risk to buy an investment property, it's to play around in the crypto market, it's to start a business. Business by far has been my best investment. It has. Business, cash flow business for sure. And then second to that is obviously investing and so on. So, yeah, it's good chatting today, mate.
If you were to give, stop trying to fucking wrap me up. I'll wrap you up when I'm ready. If you were to give one piece of advice to someone who was looking to go out and buy their first home, what would it be?
That's a great question. Someone was looking to buy their first home. Man, I mean, like you told me, put together a spreadsheet. Look at the numbers. Talk to someone who knows what they're doing. Talk to somebody who's done it before. That's the biggest thing, is mentorship. Some level of mentorship and coaching where you can talk to someone who's made the mistakes. Tony Robbins says success is a result of good judgment. Good judgment is a result of experience, and experience is often a result of bad judgment. And so this whole thing with me, why I'm willing to share it with you, is like a little bit of, I've got a lot of experience now in different areas, but a lot of it's come from bad judgment, which has made me more wise. Because now I've got better judgment. I'm actually slower to move on things, a bit more calculated, do a spreadsheet, work out all the numbers, go through all the stuff, and talk to people who've gone the road before you. You know, I got a little bit ahead of myself there with the property, but then there's plenty of other things I haven't got ahead of myself on. I've actually gotten ahead of most people on. So I'm very comfortable with that. Best advice, talk to someone who knows what they're doing, and then do the research.
Big Dom, thanks for coming in.
You're a legend, mate.